Hello and welcome, Exiles, to look at my int stacking wander I've been working on over the past couple days. As always, every single league, I want to try to make at least one character and attempt to do some Valdo voided maps. It's really just kind of a goal, something I like to try to see if I can push myself to do. This league, I decided with Pharisha, I wanted to make an int stacker with the Oath of Magi node and force tracking. The combination is fairly simplistic. Oath of Magi says you can't wear anything in certain gear pieces and you get benefits. The ones I am taking advantage of are going to be the 60 alt res for my helmet. Later on in the character, I'd like to get melding 90 alt res. That will be a future upgrade to the character. But besides that, there's also the benefit of doubling the defenses of your body armor. For example, this chest piece doesn't say 4k evasion and 800 energy shield. It actually says 8,000 evasion and 1,600 energy shield. That's how we can have such a decent energy shield number while wearing a Squire. Later on in the character, I'm going to go to a rare shield. Squire is really just a placeholder where I try to craft a good rare shield, but for the time being, it will do. And then behind Oath of Magi is the node that basically says, in my mind, play int stacker. And why does it say that in my mind? Because it says evasion gives you damage. And evasion, one of the most efficient ways to scale evasion, believe it or not, is actually intelligence. Because there are shapers such which say 2% evasion per 10 int. And then there's a mastery, which says 1% evasion per 5 intelligence. What this ends up meaning is, for every 10 intelligence, we get 4% evasion rating. So right now, with about 2,000 intelligence, that's roughly 800% increased evasion rating. That's an insane amount of evasion scaling that just with this chest piece, which is getting doubled, and with a Stibnite Flask, and with Grace, with those three things, I already have 200,000 evasion, which means this node is giving roughly about 900% increased damage. I obviously want to scale this more. I have some improvements to make to the character that are going to up our int numbers, which will up our evasion, as well as up our base evasion numbers from our chest piece, for example. I want to go for a chest piece that has quite a bit higher evasion and energy shield than this, because we need to do one with a 15% defense enchant, but that's just down the road crafting. That's the simple mechanics. It is getting us percent damage from stacking int, it's getting us percent ES, which is our raw EHP, and then int is also giving us flat damage from our wand, flat damage per 10 intelligence. Now, before I had this wand for a long time, I was using this one right here, this crystal wand, which I just made with recombinations. I think just a 4-link or a 4-socket 4-mod recombination craft is quite doable. The main thing you have to do to craft this is you have to do aspect craft, multi-mod, craft pen, recombinate, and you just want to keep doing that, basically trying to go for 4 possible links. On just a shaper base, you can get increased crit strikes, you can get faster attacks, you can get more attack damage per lightning, and you can get elemental damage with attacks or lightning pen. Any 4 of those, with the only mandatory one of these being the lightning per 10 intelligence, in my opinion. Everything else, you could just craft 1 extra bench craft and you'd be good to go. In my opinion, that would be just fine. So, recombinate yourself a wand. Ideally, I'd recommend the imbued base, but myself, when I initially started, I was just going with some okay wands that had just 2 of the mods I needed, and then I was just recombinating them together and just seeing how it went. But that's how we went about crafting our initial wand. That's the idea. I would not, under any circumstances, necessarily recommend this build on a budget. If I end up getting enough time, I might make a budget version of the build, but at the same time, Pharisha has so many cool ascendancies, and there's a lot of builds I want to make. I really want to make a Harbinger build. I really want to make an Ancestral Commander build. I really want to make a Behemoth build, believe it or not. I want to make a Puppeteer build. I want to make a, what's it called? A Surfcaster build. I want to make a Bog Witch build. I want to make a Scion build. And we only have about 2 months, so we'll see. I might get around to making a budget setup of this, but I'm not promising it because there's so many other classes I want to play, and I have a lot of build making fever. And this was the min-max project I had in mind to go for doing those Valdo voided maps. Ultimately, there's still some upgrades I need to make, but the mechanics are basically stack some int, get some ES gear, have a good time. That's the simple concept. The one big downside of this character, if there is a downside, it is my PC or the servers cannot handle it, because the way this skill works is it can shotgun. It says on it, at the very last line of that green bluish text, multiple of these projectiles can hit the same target, which ends up meaning you're incentivized to do Sniper's Mark and some mark effect scaling. For example, I have the Forbidden Flesh and Flame for focal point, which gives 75 mark effect, And then I have about 7 mark effect tattoos, which gives me 100% mark effect, which means I get 4 splits with my sniper's mark. And then I'm spell slinging my sniper's mark so that it's always getting applied to the enemy. And what ends up happening is when I hit that enemy, if I have phasing, I can stand directly underneath the enemy. I can proc with Nimbus. I think like all 5 projectiles hit. Then all of those projectiles split, they shoot out, and then they come back and hit again. I think is roughly how it works with the return proj and stuff. Before I had Nimbus, I was just playing with return proj and it worked fine. So you can play without Nimbus. I did that initially, but Nimbus is just, it's too much of a damage multiplier to ignore. It's a little bit ridiculous how good this ring is, to be quite frank. Anyways, that's the idea of the build, and why I say the server and the PC can't handle it is because if you're on a tanky enemy and you start shooting out these projectiles, it starts just really lagging up, freeze locking you because there's just too many particles and calculations being done all at once. It also works with KB, for example. I was trying KB out for clear. KB for clear is definitely better than kinetic bolt. So if I was doing a mapping setup, I'd probably do kinetic blast. Whereas I think bolt the fragmentation is a bit better single target. So that's up to you. Ultimately, this is the character I've been working on, streaming on. Hopefully you enjoy the progress of the build. And there will be many builds to come after this. This will be our more min-maxy build. And after this, we'll do builds that are definitely way more financially achievable. But for me, I wanted to make a pretty nice min-max build with forest tracking and Oath of Magi, because Oath of Magi is a throwback to my first time doing voided Valdo maps back in Affliction League when Oath of Magi was one of those sub-ascendancies you could get, and I used it with Trickster and Blade Trap way back then. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thanks for watching. There will be a POV in the description if you're curious of the other stuff I have in the build. You can look through it. That is up to your own discretion. As always, enjoy. Thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care, and have a good one.